Hannah, I just have one item at elected member communication.
Thank you for the heads up.
Aidan's one now.
Aidan, just in time. Aidan Lang. Okay, I'll just do a quick sound check with Aidan. And
I can hear you.
Ready to roll. You can hear us?
Yep.
Can you turn your camera on, then we can see you? I'm looking at the screen. Oh, there he is. Fantastic. Cool. Alrighty. So it's just about to go 6 o'clock and we've got everyone here.
I can't see Rachel.
She's going to be back in front of the screen for 6 o'clock, I'm sure. That's a good point. Rachel. All right, look, it's gone 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people and acknowledge the custodianship of elders past and present of the land that we're on, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. We don't have any apologies for tonight. We have one application of leave of absence that I have listed in front of me, which is for Councillor Thompson to go on a leave of absence from 21st of May to 22nd of July inclusive. So I'll move that one. As usual, if you can raise your hand. I think perhaps we'll default, in fact, to Councillor Deputy Mayor Moughlin as the seconder. I think we did this in one of the committees and that was quite handy. So I'll get a seconder for that, Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? Show of hands, and that's perfect. Were there any other requests for leaves of absence that I haven't seen yet? Nope, all good. We will carry on. Are there any disclosures of interest by members in relation to tonight's agenda?
Yes, I have one on item C22042. It's a proximity interest, but I'll stay in the call.
Great. And Councillor Moughlin, did I see you raise your hand as well?
Yeah, 22042. I'm a member of the Fremantle Workers Club, but it's impartiality interest and I'll participate.
Thank you. Any others? Not seeing any hands move, so we will carry on. Responses to previous questions, public questions taken on notice are printed in the agenda. So that's going to bring us to public question time. So I'll invite Paul Gamblin to speak on PC 220412. So Paul, I imagine you might have done this before. If you'd like to turn on your camera while you're speaking, and you have 3 minutes to present to us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this important item tonight on behalf of the Latent Action Coalition, which has been advocating for the sustainable planning and management of the broader Leighton Port Coast for more than 2 decades, with the support of thousands of fellow citizens. Our experience has shown that we can't take our coast for granted, and I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of many councillors over the years in the efforts to protect our precious coast. We applaud the analyses undertaken in recent years by the city and the state, confirming that Port Beach is one of the most vulnerable to erosion of any beach in Western Australia. Securing a wide foreshore is a prudent and urgent response. This land represents a one-off opportunity to create a much-needed coastal reserve in an area that is already under considerable and growing pressure from beach users. We are being asked to consider the future of a parcel of land used for industrial purposes of a bygone era. A century ago, when the seas weren't rising, when this area wasn't overcrowded with beach-going families, when Perth was a quiet country town, not a major growing city. If this MRS amendment goes any further, we are effectively being shackled to decisions made a century ago, rather than being guided by enlightened considerations for the public good and the best available science. We acknowledge the thoughtful analysis on this proposed MRS amendment for the North Fremantle area and the matters raised by our planning officers. However, we are concerned that their valid salient points will be obscured by the emphasis on urban zoning. Indeed, we think it is important that the city seeks to change the emphasis of this proposal to one that is primarily about the long-term needs of this area to accommodate coastal processes and recreational needs. We contend that based on the office's own analysis, the most logical option for any rezoning of this area should be parks and recreation. Furthermore, we believe the extent of the foreshore reserve proposed in this amendment is so fundamentally inadequate and flawed that we hope you will consider moving that the city, 1, recommend that the WAPC reject the proposal to advertise the amendment to the MRS to urban. The decision to advertise a preferred zoning option indicates a clear direction from the WAPC, and in this case, the proposal to rezone from industrial to urban would be entirely inappropriate and would send the wrong signal to the community. It would also likely compromise the further analysis of the needs of the foreshore reserve for coastal processes and recreation. The proposed foreshore reserve is so at odds with coastal policy guidelines that the WAPC would be well advised to reject the proposal on this basis alone. 2, recommend that the WAPC undertake a thorough, transparent, science-based assessment of the needs of this area for coastal processes, recreational needs, and associated values. This would involve independent experts and participation of key stakeholders, including community representatives. It would establish setback allowances for the full restoration of dunes and vegetation to promote the natural adaptation of the coast to ongoing sea level rise and storms as a consequence of climate change, and to fully ensure that this area can accommodate future community needs at the 100-year timeframe. And that's really important because that's what the coastal policy stipulates. This analysis could usefully be undertaken concurrently with the future of Fremantle and other relevant processes to better inform decisions, including the possibility that some tens of thousands of new residents will be living in the area immediately south of Tideman Road in future. And 3, recommend that the WAPC rezone the area to parks and recreation deferred. Zoning the area under consideration to parks and recreation would be seen by many in the community as a prudent and appropriate decision that puts the most logical policy emphasis on this area. It would be deferred to enable the aforementioned assessment of coastal needs and other processes to be concluded. In conclusion, if the WAPC proceeds to advertise the current proposal, the community will know that its pleas for greater access to this precious area of coast have been forsaken, and that our and future generations will be squeezed into a patch of ever-narrowing, eroding foreshore reserve. There will not be space for the dunes and vegetation that provide the best and cheapest defence against erosion. We'll be asked to fund and accommodate seawalls and groins forever, and to sacrifice some of the most beautiful beaches we have. Alternatively, the city can add its considerable weight to recommending that the WAPC reject this proposal and undertake thorough independent analysis of the needs of this vitally important coastal area and avoid making decisions that might also subsequently be at odds with other processes. We must convince the WAPC to resist developer pressure to move to advertising and instead demonstrate what good, science-based, rational planning for our coast looks like in 2022, not 1922. The future zoning and management of this coastal land represents one of the most important planning decisions for the city and for the state of this era. We only get one shot at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You're welcome to stay online in the Teams meeting, maybe turn the camera off. We will look at moving this in the agenda probably, actually it is pretty close to the front, maybe to the first item if you want to stay tuned in.
Thank you.
I don't have any other members of the public listed to speak tonight. So that takes us to petitions. I haven't had any notice of any petitions, but speak now if you've got one. No deputations, special deputations or presentations as far as I know. So I'll move to confirmation of the minutes, seconded by Councillor Moughlin.
Just that's both minutes, the special council meetings and the council meetings.
True it is, yes. So this will be the confirmation of the minutes from ordinary meeting of council 23rd of March and the special meeting of council on the 13th of April. Yep. So before we move ahead, is everyone comfortable with how those minutes have captured the decisions and discussions? Cool. So I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you. Elected member communication. Councillor Thompson, you flagged you had something you would like to say.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a reminder to councillors, if you're interested, the State Council regional meeting next week, next Wednesday, is being held on Wednesday, May the 4th at Coburn. It was actually originally scheduled to be held at Fremantle, but for various reasons, we decided to go ahead with Coburn. Partly because we weren't sure that we would necessarily be ready. So I would, if you're interested, I wouldn't bother coming along to the State Council business, which is in the morning from 10 till 2, because that's fairly straightforward and fairly mundane, but you're welcome to come along. But I would suggest, if you get the chance, to come to the Zone Forum from 2:30 to 4:30, and in which there will be presentations from the 6 members of the zone, and including the Southwest Group. So it's a good opportunity to get an overview of what's happening in our neighbouring councils. And also there is, if you can do it safely, there's a sundowner from 4:30 to 6 p.m. afterwards. So again, it's a good opportunity to just simply meet some fellow councillors and see what the range of other people are like in other councils. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Is it possible to attend online as well as for people who can't get there physically?
Look, I don't know. I'm not sure whether arrangements. Oh, look, I'll find out. I'll find out and let you know.
Great, thank you. All right, any other elected member communication? Can't see any hands raised, so we will carry on. With your agreement, I'll move to the MRS amendment, the PC 220412, North Fremantle Development Precinct. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, and I think Councillor Moughlin, if you can second that. Also bearing in mind that Councillor Sullivan has moved some additional amendments to this, which should be in your additional documents. So perhaps if we, I don't know if we maybe go straight to, given this has already gone to planning, go straight to Councillor Sullivan's amendments.
Good idea.
Yeah. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I mean, I had started to present a draft version of these amendments to the Planning Committee at the time. It wasn't complete, and I also wanted to hear any feedback from my colleagues on the matter, and also from community groups as well. So I've polished that a little bit and presented it to you. I just wanted to say, perhaps I need a seconder first before I start going into detail.
Councillor Groom seconding that, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. Just in relation to the comment made by Paul Gamblin from the Latent Action Coalition, where he was basically requesting that we tell the Planning Commission simply not to go ahead at all at this stage with a proposed MRS amendment. So just bear in mind that this is sort of like a preliminary consultation before they initiate the amendment. So it is the only time when we could actually say to them, please don't initiate it yet, or please don't initiate it full stop, or don't initiate it when until such time as some of these very pertinent questions have been answered. So in my amendments, and I know there are a lot there, and I'm not going to even begin to try and explain in detail, but after the first 4 dot points and before it goes into 1A, it makes the statement that says the rezoning exercise is considered premature. Now, some of you will understand what that terminology means. It essentially is saying premature means it is something that shouldn't be presented yet. That's a legalistic term when we use it that way. But it's basically saying it's not ready. You know, the planning for the area is not yet ready to have this level of consideration. And then it goes on, obviously, to explain some of the reasons why. And I'm very appreciative of the work that Paul Garbett and his staff have done in presenting the recommendation, the officer's recommendation. And I guess what I've tried to do is to give it a little bit more of a dot-pointed preamble, but also to include that very clear understanding that for a number of reasons, one of which is coastal planning, and the other one is all of the land between the North Fremantle town centre and this supposed development site, that really needs to have a lot more consideration of it before anybody should be ready to start initiating a rezoning. And then, of course, in addition to that, those two really critical planning exercises, we have the future of Fremantle hanging over the top of it as well. I don't understand the rush to try and get this initiation of an MRS amendment commenced. I appreciate it does take, potentially a couple of years, and there's a whole bunch of work, including environmental assessments that they need to do. But for my thinking, that body of work actually needs to be done not just on this site, but across the foreshore area existing, the foreshore area that needs to be there, the whatever might or might not be left over after that of the private owner's land that might be able to be used for something else, and all of the land between the private owner's land and including the roads that wrap around the existing town centre of North Fremantle. Because unless you do that as an integrated study, and hopefully that will be initiated at least in the first instance by Future of Fremantle, but unless that is done as an integrated study, we are not going to get an outcome that serves our community well. And so for all of those reasons, I drafted some amendments. And I guess the second most important amendment, other than stating that it's a premature proposal coming from the Planning Commission, is very much about including that body of work that needs to happen between the town centre and this site. Because I really worry about, it's basically like these developers have got the rod, but there are two major dumbbells at either end of it that aren't yet even properly attached. And until they are, I would prefer that they considered rezoning to be premature. So I've put that forward as a body of amendments. I hope it's all understood, and if not, I'm more than happy to chop bits out or modify bits if there is major objection to anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Groom, as seconder, did you wish to speak on this next? And you might want to turn your mic on before you say something enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, lucky you kind of do ums and ahs at first, isn't it? First of all, I do want to acknowledge the work the officers did and their recommendation regarding urban deferred, which is a really sound recommendation. And urban deferred is the appropriate tool in our planning system to give the landowner and potential investors some kind of understanding that there is support for those proposed uses, but also to give the community the confidence that the work that needs to be done has to be done before other work can get started, and that the final extent of area that might be suited to urban is still up for question. And that, it's a very loud signal that the range of issues that Councillor Sullivan has outlined in his amendments or expanded in his amendments need to be addressed. So I am concerned that the amendment has got wordy, but I think in planning land, that's probably okay in the context of the work and the things that we want to communicate as being important to this council and to our community. So yeah, happy to support the amendment as proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll just give you my two bobs worth on this one. At the Planning Committee, I voted against the recommendation because of the urban deferred status. I wasn't terribly aware of urban deferred, and I've done a bit of research and I found that out now. Look, I understand. I've read the stuff from the Latent Action Group people, and Paul Gamblin spoke very well, and I understand where he's coming from. I understand where Councillor Sullivan's coming from, and most probably where most of you sitting around the table are coming from. But I've got just a slightly different view on this. This is an opportunity, a strategic opportunity for the city to satisfy our getting, well, let's say from the Dogleg down to Tideman Road, to me, is an ideal opportunity to redevelop that area. The coastal setbacks and all that, the science will take care of all that. Structure plans will take care of a lot of the things that have already been indicated in the officer's recommendation. But I think we've got to be a bit of a brave council as well and recognise that this opportunity to develop this part of the land is a once in a lifetime opportunity for Fremantle. Now, you might not agree with that, but that is my view. And my cat's just walking across the computer here. And I have trust in these companies, perhaps not so much the developers, I don't know much about them, but the consultants that are involved in this, the Taylor Burrells, the Urbis, they're all very highly respected people in their genre, and they're going to really do their best to look after both interests, I think the developer's interest and the city's interest. So I think we just need to, I'm supporting the recommendation. You know, there's no point not to. The WAPC will sign off, I'm sure, an urban status at some point in this whole process. Good luck if Paul if it doesn't, and I wish him well in that endeavour, but I don't think we can do much about that. But I just want to twig some of your consciousness about where we're going as a council, as far as getting our rate base up, getting good development. We've seen what's happened at Leighton. Get the alignment of Curtin Avenue better treated, just have filter roads down to the beach. So there's a whole lot of stuff. We could talk all day. We heard about the futures of Frios a few weeks ago. I mean, that was a blah, blah, blah fest if I ever saw one. And that'll be 15 to 20 years in the making. So yeah, anyway, that's where I'm coming from. Just thought I'd let you know.
All right, councillors, any other contributions? Ben looks like he's on. Councillor Moughlin, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I suppose, you know, listening to both sides there from Councillor Graham and Councillor Sullivan, I don't think there's actually too much different in those positions that are being held between both Councillor Graham and Sullivan. And yeah, there is certainly that recognition that this site is an important site for the development of Fremantle. Yeah, share Councillor Groom's thoughts in regards to the wordiness of the amendment, and I must admit that I did get a little lost in the amendment itself, and took several readings to get there. But in having said that, recognise that there is additional work that needs to be done. Urban deferred is an important signal for everyone to understand that that is our preference. Do share the concern about making sure that we get appropriate setbacks from the coast, and ensuring that any development that does occur here is a sustainable development, and one that we will be able to look back on in 50 years' time, and it's not underwater, and it's a place where people are living, and it's contributing to the greater Fremantle area. So yeah, support the amendment put by Councillor Sullivan.
Councillor Lorber.
Just a quick question. I fully support the amendments that Councillor Sullivan put forward, but I had some comments on the motion itself. Would you like me to reserve those for after this vote, or make those comments now?
I think because the amendments incorporate most of the officer's recommendation and then add to them, you could probably make those comments now.
Okay, great. Well, just to be 100% clear, I think what Councillor Sullivan put forward actually clarifies more what we're trying to see happen in the future up there. And I think that was really well done. And I thank him for doing that work. But on the motion itself and on the report itself on page 24, there's a statement there that I, as a councillor, we're not supposed to vote for things that we know are not to be true. And it says, even with, this is a quote from the report that we have, it says, even with billions of dollars in road upgrades, the transport network supporting the Fremantle Inner Harbor would reach capacity by the mid-2030s. And that's taken from the Westport report, and the staff have accurately reported what Westport ultimately said. But that conclusion is really in error. And even Westport acknowledges that on Tideman Road, which is the main road going to the port, only 10% of that traffic is actually trucks. And the main driver of congestion on our local roads is going to be cars, and moving the port will literally have very little to do to address this. And actually, when I was on the Westport committee, one of the reports we had said that converting all that land to tourism and condos would make congestion on these local roads worse than if we did nothing. So that statement about that the roads are going to reach capacity by the mid-2030s because of the port, that's just not accurate in my view. And also, there were solutions that were ignored during that whole process. Solutions that would have seen freight volumes nearly double than what they are today. And this would occur without putting any extra pressure on the local roads from trucks. So nearly double the current freight volume without any extra pressure on local roads. And then this may sound like it's pie in the sky, but these solutions would also reduce pollution from these trucks by 80%. So saying that this port is going to cause a truck apocalypse in the mid-30s really is a bit of a furphy. And just so everyone knows that solution is not a pie in the sky. It's not a wish list on things. It's actually based on existing technology, because if you look at the port's own truck surveys and traffic surveys, between 2014 and 2019, trade grew by an average of 2% each year, but the number of trucks on the road decreased by an average of 5% each year. So while trade was growing, the impact on our local roads was decreasing. So I just, while the staff did an accurate job of reporting what Westport had said on that, I personally don't really buy into the fact that if we move the port, we're going to avoid a big road congestion. At best, it'll kick the can down the road a couple of years, in which case we're still going to have to spend billions of dollars on those roads, or ideally on public transit. So I just wanted to say, yes, the staff reported it accurately, but I don't believe that conclusion drawn was true. So.
Thank you. Other people to speak on the amendment? So I'll just briefly speak to say I support the amendment. I think Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Groom said it's wordy, but it says what we need to say. My intention coming out of here would be to take this position as an advocacy position, then with the WAPC and the government, to say we very much feel like this is premature, and here are some of the reasons why. I think some of the things, and I guess a separate conversation I'm having is around future of Fremantle Committee and how, as a committee of the WAPC, they have a position on this, whether they are able to or not, because it very much looks to me like, as the consultant is appointed in the next few months to do the work for future of Fremantle, a lot of that scope is around impacts of sea level rise. All of the questions that we've raised will start to be answered through that process. So, when we say urban deferred, we don't mean urban deferred forever. We mean urban deferred till we can resolve some of the really complex issues that have been highlighted by this amendment, but that we are also in the process of trying to understand through that work, through the consultancy. So I don't think it is deferring it forever or, a whole lot of blah, blah. I think it is that we will get some actual work done in the next year or so that allows us to define this. I think the other thing that comes to mind for me is the challenges we've got around McCabe Street at the moment. So I know we're talking about a different location, but where we've seen significant urban infill development, large numbers of people moving into an area where none of this work has been done sufficiently early enough to say, yeah, we do have ways of moving people around. There is easy access to public transport. There's ways to get cars in and out. So doing that work beforehand means that we don't end up with a quick trying to retrofit uncomfortably a solution once those developments are actually underway, and it gives clarity to those developers about what's going to be in place for them. So in a way, I'd rather like them to embrace the idea of urban deferred, to say our developments are going to be much more viable, sensible, realistic, connected, if we actually let this work happen first. The final point, I think, is with Future of Fremantle. I think it's really clear that development on the North Quay, you know, it can't be a car-based development and work. So understanding how public transport might work through there and what we need to reserve to allow public transport to connect properly through there is really, really important. So that work that's going to happen through Future of Fremantle, I think, is critical to also the viability of these developments. So thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for the work that you've done on it, and I'll hand back to you to close.
Thank you. And I would like to just respond to a few of the comments. And obviously it would be rare that anyone would accuse me, and no one has tonight, of being anti-development or not trying to seek, I guess, to meet our obligations under the state imperatives that we significantly increase the population of Fremantle. And that is always one of my strategic imperatives, and I know it's also shared by most of the council. But I also understand very intrinsically that nothing is more costly to the city in terms of dollars or to the community than getting the coastal planning wrong. So over the longer term, the more we get it wrong, the more it's going to cost our communities into the future, not just in dollars in terms of ratepayers' money, but also in the lack of amenity that we have, the lack of recreational access and amenity that we have to those areas that we share with a vast majority of the people in the central areas of Perth. 70% of the people who come to Leighton Beach come from south of the river, and something like 45% of the infill development is going to occur in the central areas of Perth. So we are talking about a massive increase in demand, not the least of which is then potentially thwarted by sea level rise. So we're going to cop it from both ends, in a sense, by increased demand and sea level rise. But we have an opportunity to get that right here. And I do want to really distinguish between the difference between structure planning after you've done an MRS zoning and trying to get the MRS zoning right in the first place. People often get confused between parks and recreation, which is the regional zone for foreshores, and local open space that we might put in a structure plan. The parks and recreation regional reserve, the foreshore reserves, need to be set in place at the beginning of the process. Otherwise, because this land is essentially given back to the state as part of the process of upzoning the developer's land. It is given back to the state for that purpose. It is a privilege, it's a reward that these developers get to upzone their land. They're not getting something for free, they're getting a significant upzoning so they can use the land in a way that is far more profitable for them. But there is also a responsibility that they contribute back into the community pool that will then service that development and all of the other developments that are occurring. And it's critical that we get that Parks and Recreation Reserve width right for sea level rise and for the recreational space that needs to still be there in 100 years' time, not in the ocean, but on land. And that's the thing that isn't currently being provided in the proponents' proposed MRS amendment. The Latent Action Coalition's basically stance is that all of the land should be zoned for parks and recreation until such time as it can be proven that it's not needed. That's not what this recommendation is saying. What this recommendation and amendment are saying is that until such time as we have a really clear understanding about what the foreshore reserve width and area should be like, we shouldn't be jumping into sort of an arbitrary line on a map that says the vast majority, almost all of the developer's land is not required for coastal purposes, because that's what it currently says. And that's what we need to stand up and fight against now. Because if we don't, what will happen is we will get a design and defend planning process whereby the MRS, the Planning Commission, put out a document. It shows roughly where the foreshore reserve will be. All of the environmental assessments and planning reports that will be done trying to justify that outcome. And we will be fighting tooth and nail to claw back a few millimetres on that map here and there. And we can't let that happen. And that is why both the motion as put forward by the officers and my amendment are so critically important to get right. Thank you.
And thank you. So I will now put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? And I'm seeing, oh, Councillor Graham, I'm not sure if you're for or against. Can you speak up and tell me you're for? So that's unanimous. Thank you. Excellent. That was the amendment. So back to the item as amended. If anyone still wishes to speak and hasn't had the opportunity, let me know. Otherwise, I'll put the item as amended. All those in favour? That's unanimous as well.
Cool.
Thank you very much. That brings us, I'll go back to the first planning committee item. Councillor Jones, I didn't give you an opportunity to introduce the, as chair, the previous one. Did you want to say anything by way of introduction for this one?
Well, no, I think we agreed not to do that when we're doing online meetings, so that's fine. I would just say that the first item, the house on Thompson Road, is now up for sale, and it was open last Saturday, and it was very interesting to go and have a look. It's very much bigger than I thought, and it's quite a challenging building, I would say, to develop.
Okay, so I'll move the officer's recommendation on that one, and Councillor Moughlin as a seconder for that. Any further discussion on this one? All right, not seeing any hands up. So on that basis, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. All right, I might just go through now the FPOL items and just see if there's anything that people want to speak on. So I'm going to assume people do want to speak on FPOL 22045, but if you could jump in if you do want to speak on any of the following ones, let me know. So the 20226, so the sitting schedule, venue support 22027 for the sit, 22048 Virginia Ryan as a dog exercise area. Councillor Groom wants to speak on that one, so we won't do that on block. Budget amendments. Councillor Busick. Shall we? All right, we'll just leave it at that. So I might just move.
6 and 7.
Yeah, FPOL 22022. Can't get this right. My twos. 6 and 7. I'm going to move those two on block. Councillor Moughlin to second. All those in favour? Excellent. All right, so I'll go back to item 5, the management order for Pioneer Park. I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. I think some people probably wanted to speak on this one. No. Yeah, I was seeing one hand go up from Councillor Lorber.
Councillor Groom.
And Councillor Groom to follow, I think. and Councillor Lang. So I'll just get those in order, but Councillor Lorber, I think you were first.
Yeah, I tried to ask some questions earlier this week and got an amendment that was too late to be considered tonight. That basically followed the, you broke it, you bought it principle, where, this park, I wasn't on council when, the 10 city happened and the state government came and took it off the council. But I think if if something like that happens, you should return it as you got it. And unfortunately, we're getting back a park that needs some substantial repairs. So I'd hope to move an amendment to that effect, but it came too late for consideration tonight. So.
Thanks, Councillor Lorber. Councillor Lang, your hand is up as an emoji hand, but I think Councillor Groom, you also had your hand up. So if it's all right, I'll go Councillor Lang and then Councillor Groom.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions on this item. Just confirming the timeline on this one is the government seized the park. They continued to use the bore for Pioneer Park and the PTA land in front of the train station. Then it broke. They fixed their irrigation in front of the train station, then offered to hand Pioneer Park back. Is that correct?
I'm going to get the CEO to respond and perhaps give us a bit of a kind of quick history recap on this one.
And just before he does, my final question was, I believe that time was probably right. I was wondering how long did they use that bore to irrigate the PTA site in front of the train station?
Possible that we might need to get the director in on some of that technical detail, but I'll go to the CEO first. So I'll turn my mic off.
Thank you, through the chair. So the site was handed back, or the proposal was to hand the site back to state government to allow them to enter in and with the police to clean up the tent city site at the time. And negotiations between the city and state government were progressing towards that conversation. At the time, there was an element to their hand pack that the city wasn't entirely comfortable with. And so the minister of the day decided that they would put in a ministerial order to take the land back, or the vesting back. That was to allow for the lawful request for police to go in and clean up the site under government direction. At the time when we were speaking with state government, the plan was that the city would maintain the care of the reserve despite the vesting being handed back until such a time when it could safely be handed back to the city. That just took a little while to occur. So during the whole time that the vesting was outside the city was still looking after the park. Everything was under our care and control. It just wasn't technically vested in the city, and that was part of the original agreement with the state government. The Department of Transport query that you had in relation to using the bore site, I think that's occurred for quite some time. But when the bore broke and the city took a little while to repair it, Department of Transport decided to go their own way in making sure that they could continue to maintain their garden. So they no longer need access to the bore as they previously had.
Thanks for answering the questions, Glenn. And I guess that's the crux.
Sorry, we're just switching computers here.
Sure.
Yep, Councillor Lang.
Thanks. We must assume they've been using that bore for decades to irrigate the PTA land. We don't know, but I think that's a pretty safe assumption. And when it breaks, when they're in ownership of it, they decide to fix one side of the road and then give the other side back to us. And we know it's going to cost $250,000 to fix it. I do not see any way that is a fair deal for any ratepayers in Freo. And I understand we've gone and asked for a contribution and they said no. I can't support this, and I couldn't support it as a budget item if we took the site back. I'm just wondering if there's another option for us before we commit to this to go back, maybe ask for 50% of the bore repair or something like that. Because at the moment, it's a really raw deal for us. And I'm thinking about other elements in play here as well. The spare parts puppet theatre's got $10 million and they plan on redeveloping a large portion of Pioneer Park. The plans I've seen is a lot of large landscaping and paving, and that needs to be taken into consideration as well when that's a state asset. And yeah, my key message is that I'm not comfortable, given that they've been using this bore to water the PTA land for so long, and they expect the Fremantle ratepayers to fix it up. They've been using it for so long. So as it stands, I mean, maybe I'll flag a minor amendment at some stage, but as it stands, I just cannot support it. It's a really raw deal for the city of Freo.
Just to your question on the bore, it's a detailed question, so I don't know if either Mr. Tattersall or Mr. Abbott are online and can give us a sense of how long the PTA might have been using that bore, and also proportionally what their use of the bore might have looked like. So if either of those people are able to respond to that, I think a little more detail might be helpful, but I'll give them a sec to turn on their mics if they think they can respond.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, we have discussed this. As far as we're aware, it's been a long-standing arrangement that there was a tee-off that fed the PTA land and their area. We were unaware of it, to be honest. And when the bore actually failed, it did take us a while to pick it up. It was only an issue that we had complaints coming in of browning grass that we were aware we had an issue initially. And it was once we started the investigations that we engaged with the PTA and talked about options. We discussed and explored a contribution, a proportional contribution in respect to the area that they benefited from as well. But initially they were open to talk to us, and it looked like we did have potentially a solution. But we subsequently found out that they'd gone for an alternative option and used scheme water to independently irrigate that parcel of land. So we did go back to them again, and we didn't get any cooperation on that.
Thank you. So Councillor Lang, hopefully that maybe provide a little more insight. So I will go to Councillor Groom, who has her hand up next and needs to turn her microphone on. Thank you.
Hopefully you don't have to remind me all night. Thanks to the officers who have kind of responded to a barrage of questions on this. I think it is really important that we note and understand that we're talking about a 50-year-old bore. So the bore didn't just stop working in the last 12 months because it was being used. Like, it's an old bore, it's collapsed, and that's what happens. And it's just one of many old bits of infrastructure we are trying to contend within the city. I guess my concern is whether spending $220,000 on a new 100-metre bore for one park is really where our funding priorities lie, and whether, as been alluded to, we can start to move to a far more water-wise treatment of that site, whether we can coordinate that work with work that Spare Parts might be thinking about, etc., etc. And therefore, should we be continuing to water in an alternative way and really understand what the future water needs of that site are before we put in such a big investment in a water source for one single site, basically. So, yeah, I'm struggling to support that expenditure as it stands now, because I can't see that kind of broader, more strategic business case of options has really been undertaken.
I'm just clarifying, and maybe someone could jump in if I'm not correct here. The motion in front of us says basically that officers will submit a budget request to us for the bore. So yeah, it takes back the management order, but it doesn't commit us necessarily. So, I mean, because I've had similar concerns to the ones just raised by you, Councillor Groom. So I just wanted to take a moment to clarify that it will be a subject of budget discussion rather than a commitment at this stage.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Kamada, you're next up.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzharding. Yeah, look, when this went to FPOL, I found it very hard to support and voted against it. And I maintain the same position because I just, as Councillor Lang said, it's really not a fair deal for Fremantle. It's an unfortunate situation in the timing of obviously with the ball going down. But I just feel that the ratepayers are the ones ultimately paying for the situation that we've been put in after the Tentland affair. So yeah, for those reasons, I find it very hard to support. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. You're next up.
Thank you. And yeah, I was going to make mention of the same point before, that this is really about the management order and this coming back to the city, and budget discussions, we can have those down the track. I understand other elected members' concerns about the cost or otherwise to reinstate the bore. But I suppose from my perspective, at some point in time, we must have had an agreement with the PTA for them to tee off from our infrastructure and put a service in there. And I suspect if it was tested in a court of law, that would have been taken as an agreement of sorts, that they had use of that bore as well. But in having said that, the actual use itself compared to the volumes that would have been going through Pioneer Park would have been quite minuscule. The irrigation done by the PTA is a small area, and ours is quite significant. So I suspect it was a handshake agreement to allow them to use the service. But essentially, it has been ours, and it has been ours for many years. And during the time that the state did take control of that land, for all intents and purposes, we were still running and using that. So certainly it's a City of Fremantle asset, and an important one for us, I think, to be able to control. I encourage us all to put our thinking caps on and have that conversation as part of the budget discussion, and put those challenges to staff over the coming weeks to understand the best way for us to manage that park.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm never really sure whether the councillor, the angry ant, turns up or the pragmatic one in me turns up. So I'll probably try and let both of them have a say. I obviously reject the notion that the vesting should ever have been taken away from us, and I won't go into great detail about that. It was not required to do any of the things that happened on the day when the park was cleared. Everything had been put in place. It was a last-minute stunt. I use that word because that's what I consider it exactly to be. But that's in the past, and it's water under the bridge. And it's very much a case of looking at, going forward for me. And I think Councillor Groom, in her questioning and also in thinking about some of the answers to it, is sort of summing it up, because that park is going to change significantly. We ought to be focused on what needs to happen in that area over the coming years. The entrance into Victoria Quay to make it development ready, the forecourt of the railway station, the changes that will inevitably happen to that park, which will include a much more appropriate kind of park environment for the sort of urban environment that we're going to be going into the future in that space. It's a currently very underutilised park. It's literally 100 metres from where I'm sitting, and there is hardly anybody ever on my side of the park, on the Pakenham Street end of the park. And there's not really all that many people on the other side very often either, that warrant having so much grass and so much irrigation. It does worry me that over the years, when we have given free use of something, we have paid for the infrastructure, we have paid for the power to run the pumps, probably fixed the pumps up maintenance-wise whenever they broke to make sure that our park and their park was being used. But, you would think after that length of time that government would be at least a little bit generous towards the infrastructure cost. But that's not going to be, and we're not going to change their opinion about this. So what we should be doing is saying, well, okay, City of Fremantle, ratepayers picking this up again, but let's focus again on the big picture, on the bit that's moving forward, and go to the state government and say, look, we take the part back, obviously. We're not sure we should spend all this money on it right away. We want a better understanding about when we can anticipate some changes to the spare parts puppet theatre, when we can anticipate the forecourt, when we can anticipate the opening up of Victoria Quay to make that area development ready, so that we don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on fixing something that probably doesn't need to be replaced in that form. So that's where I'm standing. I will support the recommendation. Obviously, we need all the open space we can get in the middle of Fremantle, and we should definitely take this space back without going into too much of a war over it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to assess that as the pragmatic version. Councillor Archibald.
Yes, well, I think Councillor Sullivan's probably stolen a lot of the thunder any of us could have. But I support taking the park back. I do acknowledge that, this is a 50-year odd bore, whatever the years it is. And I did note that the staff mentioned in the report that part of their consideration for getting the bore put in was also it would be used for the future redevelopment of the forecourt area and those sorts of areas. So I, like others, feel concerned about the amount of money, and I'm quite happy to have that discussion when we get down the track in the budget meetings. I'm not convinced that necessarily next financial year is essential, but I'd rather hear what the staff had to say about how they might manage that area in the interim. And of course, the other thing is if spare parts has got some proposals, we need to see those as well before we make any major commitments. So I'd like to put all those things together before we make any commitment on spending the money for that bore. So I do support the recommendation as it stands to take back the park.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Busick.
I haven't seen anything there that would change my mind. I won't be supporting the recommendation. I think we should use it as some leverage to have further discussions and look at some other options, just to handball it to the ratepayers and have a future plan. I just don't think it's good enough.
Thank you. Councillor Lang, you must have a question. Or you've unraised your hand.
Sorry, wrong button. Two questions. Can we vote on A, B and C separately as possible?
Yes, I guess so, although they all presuppose the prior statement.
Yeah, they do.
So yes, I suppose we could. I'm not sure, as long as we include in that the prior statement will remain, I suppose.
I mean, that's where I struggle. I mean, I do see the importance of getting the park back, but it's the financial contribution bit that I'm stuck on. And is there an opportunity to maybe amend B? Can we go back to the PTA and ask again for a contribution?
Yeah, so I don't think we're going to go into amendments now on the fly. I'm probably not supportive of that. But perhaps what we could do is renumber. So we say 1, council accept the management order, etc., etc. 2, council note that, and then A, B, C, which would then give you the opportunity to vote for 1, but not for 2, A, B, C. So I'm just flagging that as a possibility if you wanted to be able to support the management order, but not those subsequent points.
Maybe. I mean, I accept that the bore has failed and needs replacement, so I kind of accept A.
Yep. I mean, they're really for noting, I think, that ABC, they don't actually commit to anything or serve any, tangible, I guess, purpose. Councillor Jones, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, well, A, B, and C are simply statements of fact, so I don't know how you can vote against them. I mean, I don't know how you can vote in parts and not vote for them because they're simply statements of fact that we are noting. So I'm very comfortable with that. The discussion will happen during the budget review, and obviously will be bigger than just the bore. It'll be the whole future of Pioneer Park. So I'm very happy to vote in one piece and do the whole thing.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, look, I think it'd be quite easy to accommodate Councillor Lang's request just simply by changing the words in B to say officers again seek contribution. At least it satisfies Aidan that we've done everything. So if you're happy to accept that as a minor amendment, I would move that as a minor amendment and see what happens.
So you're suggesting that we add a new sentence to be...
No, just where it says officers have sought, just change the words have sought to again seek contribution.
Okay. Councillor Lang, is that going some way to address your concerns?
Yeah, it does. That. If we're going back, I'm just seeking a bit more equity for ratepayers. Our purse is a lot smaller than the state government, and I'm just trying to find a bit more of an equitable balance.
Okay, and specifically PTA, or I mean DPLH, I wouldn't suspect has an operational budget to do anything, to be frank. But
I'm not fussed which government department want to give us money for it.
Councillor Kamada, did you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's an obvious one, but obviously the last 4 words in Part B would have to come out, which both agencies decline.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like there's sufficient support to go with a sort of fairly minor amendment here. So, we'll put this together to move as a minor amendment. I think Councillor Lang, it sounds like you would want to move that says officers seek, seek contribution from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage and Public Transport Authority towards the replacement of the bore, and delete the final 4 words. Yep. Councillor Lorver, you will maybe want to second that, or Councillor Pemberton, did you want to speak? You wanted to second?
No.
You wanted to speak?
Just briefly. Sorry. Hello. I don't want to.
It's been moved and seconded, so we're now on this amendment. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I just wondered. I don't think the intention necessarily is for officers to go and have another conversation exactly with the same people they already had a conversation. So I wonder whether or not there's some good logic in not referring to officers, like maybe it's a political thing as opposed to officer level thing. That is my question.
I'm not sure quite who answers that. I mean, I wouldn't support that from the perspective that I feel like there are much bigger issues and challenges in play here that have far greater significance for city outcomes. So I guess when we talk about Station Forecourt, when we talk about connections through to Victoria Quay, when we talk about what do we want the entry statement to the city to be when you step off the train, all of that stuff, I would prefer to prosecute those arguments with a view to significant state government funding for those kind of projects than I would to go in and bat for a bore, quite honestly, when we don't even know that that's exactly what we want to do in this space. So I guess if you're suggesting that it's elevated to a political level through me, I obviously will follow the direction of council, but I feel really uncomfortable wasting political mileage on that when I think we've got so many much better opportunities that are very real and very live and very, optimistic at the moment. So.
Fair comment. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, we're on the amendment.
Yeah, I don't support changing Part B because it's not logical. We're noting it, so we can't note an instruction to the officers to go and do something. It's a different thing entirely. I think we should simply let this go through and then have a discussion about the future of Pioneer Park as a separate item in the future. But you can't note something that says, ask the officers go and do something. That's actually a resolution of council, which is not what this is.
Good point. Okay. Councillor Pemberton, your hand's still up, but I think that was probably from when you spoke before. Councillor Lang, did you want to try and close on this proposed amendment and then we'll put it to a vote? You're on mute or you're very quiet.
Thanks. Yeah, I do struggle with this item a lot. As an example, when the state government took this site from us in 45 minutes, and when we're asking them for years to take the roundhouse from us, which costs us an absolute fortune, and we've been asking for years to take that, they won't take that item. They take this place in 45 minutes. They've been using assets on the site for decades, no financial contribution, and expecting the ratepayer to pick up the pieces. I'm just trying to find something more equitable, and all I'm asking is that we go back and say, can you contribute 50% or something towards the repair of the site, rather than again the ratepayers carrying the can for state government in Freo. That's what I'm trying to achieve here.
Okay. Now, in order for your amendment to make sense, just while I've got you on the line, I think what we would need to do is move the word noting to the first word after A and the first word after C. So we would be noting A and C, and at B we would be requesting officers to seek contribution. Looking at the CEO to make sure that he thinks that drafting on the fly is okay. Councillor Larch, you're going to jump in and say something on that along those lines as well? I'm assuming probably yes. Councillor Lang?
I was going to say thanks for massaging that and cleaning up all those loose ends. Help it make sense.
Okay. All right. All right. So we'll put the amendment to the vote. So all those in favour of Councillor Lang's amendment. So I have Councillors Kamara, Graham, Pemberton, Lorver, Archibald, Lang and Mofflin and Thompson in favour of that. And those against, got myself, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Jones and Councillor Busick. If I didn't call you or didn't call you correctly, please let me know. Good. All right, so back to the item as amended now. Do we wish to vote? No, nobody wants me to call it separately now, do they? I'm assuming not. Okay, so back to the item as amended. All of those in favour. And that's against. Councillors Busick and Kamada against, and everyone else in favour. Awesome. That is passed. On we go. So, sorry, bits of paper, quick juggle. This will take us now to advertising of Virginia Ryan as a dog exercise area 22048. I will move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Mofflin. Councillor Graham, I have a hunch that you wish to speak on this one.
I probably have a question as much as anything, and to understand the process, but also understand the thinking about the playground that's currently located in that park. It is the only playground really at that end of it's no longer White Gum Valley, but in that part of Fremantle. And many people see a dog park and a playground as being an inherent conflict, especially an off-lead park. So I'm just wondering what the thinking was about that, which wasn't addressed in the report, and to try and understand what the consultation process looks like, because obviously as local councillors, they are questions that may get brought up.
I'm just having a quick look to see if Ryan Abbott is online. Ryan, if you're here, let us know. I don't think he is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have asked these beforehand.
No, that's okay. I had also raised this, and I don't know whether it's come to Mr. Tattersall's. Oh no, Ryan, can't tell if it's online or not, level or not. But this is a request to advertise, and my view was that we needed to ensure that not only with the online engagement, but also that we had signage up not only at that park but also at Stevens Reserve to sort of get the kind of broader dog and park user community involved. I haven't had a response on that yet because I've only just asked it in the last couple of days, but perhaps I can ensure that you and Councillor Archibald are included in whatever the communication plan proposes to be.
Yeah, and some explicit information about the thinking in the playground, because I think that would need to be addressed when we take it out to consultation, so the community can contemplate instead of just yes or no because we want to keep the playground or not keep the playground. Let's talk to it before we go out with a consultation. So
cool. So we might just take a note for Ryan to come back to us on what he's thinking there, whether that's to fence it or. Councillor Archibald, did you want to?
Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that I had a bit of discussion with Ryan on this. The playground obviously is to stay there. It's not an extensively used park as it currently is. In fact, I think a bit more use would be really beneficial because they have a few problems with people kind of hanging around and trying to create a bit of mischief when they can. So a bit more use would probably be beneficial. And I think the intent was that the playground is kind of sectioned off from the rest of the park so that there is no conflict between the playground users and the park users. And of course, you know, the idea is to fence the dog area off so that they're safe and they can run around off lead and all that sort of thing. So, you know, as was said, this is going out for public comment, and it will be good to get the feedback from people who live in that area to see what they do think, and also to find out what people think up at Stevens Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kamada and then Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment as such, I suppose. I think it'd be a really good thing if this goes ahead. I noted in the officer's comments that changes to fencing around Stevens Reserve will alleviate some of the current issues of shared use. How is it envisaged that, or what status will Stevens Reserve have if this goes ahead? Is it anticipated to be perhaps leash only, or is there any thought, or can anyone answer that question at this point?
Feel a bit conscious of answering for officers, but given Ryan's not here. The intention would be that it stays a dog off-leash area, but that the fences become less secure, I guess, would be the idea. So the gates are removed, but there'll be crossover fencing so that balls don't go out onto the road effectively. So I think the desire was to balance the needs of the club to have people keep the cricket club and the hockey club to have people keep their dogs under control while they're using that space, but also to prevent things, you know, balls going out onto the road and kids running after them and all that. So I think Ryan's coming up with a design solution for that addresses that issue. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I suppose it does. So that'll encourage, by opening up the fencing, encourage dog owners obviously to be more responsible, and you know, obviously don't want dogs that they can't control running around. So if that's the idea, I take it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, your hand has gone down. Councillor Busick, your hand has gone up.
Thank you. This is more of a question. I'm assuming that this is going to come back again to council. This is going for consultation. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, there go the lights again. So energy efficient. Councillor Jones, did you not want to speak on this one?
I don't know if the consultation should also refer to the future of Stevens Reserve as well. I mean, to me, the reason we're doing this is to change the situation at Stevens Reserve, so that the changes proposed there should be part of the consultation process. And I must say, I've driven past Stevens Reserve a couple of times recently and absolutely staggered at the number of dogs there.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. 50 or 60. You know, it's just incredible.
I think the thinking was that until we can't really resolve Stevens until we know whether there is support for this to become a dog off-leash area, because if there is not, you know, if we get a strong backlash against this being a dog off-leash area, you know, there's less opportunity to ameliorate the impact on Stevens. So I think the conversation about Stevens kind of has to be a sequential conversation with this, in a sense. Councillor Pemberton.
Thanks. Yeah, look, just for clarification for those who have not been following this in detail over the last few months, there is also another park that is a potential alternative, and I guess it is around the idea of ideally relieving the pressure on Stevens Reserve by having a couple of, well, having somewhere else that people feel is safe and secure to take their dogs. And the corner of Knutsford Street and Swanbourne Street is a park that is currently a dog off-lead area, and it has a fence on two sides, and it has the capability of being converted to a fenced dog area as an alternative. The suggestion by staff was that Virginia Ryan was the preference out of the two, because it's slightly closer to Stevens Reserve and therefore a more direct kind of correlation of people shifting from Stevens Reserve down. But I guess I'm just pointing out that there are other options on the table potentially. Ironically, this one also has a playground in it, but it's a playground that's virtually never used and so if this is unsuccessful, if there is not community support, then there may be another alternative on the table.
And I think, if I'm correct, that alternative wouldn't require an advertisement of change of use because it is already a dog off-leash area despite being unfenced.
That's right.
So we wouldn't need to go through this process. All right. I think that's everyone. I might put this one to a vote. So all those in favour? That looks unanimous to me. Excellent. Cool beans. I did get a second of that one, I was feeling. Okay, that's going to bring us to budget amendments. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. And Councillor Vusic, I think you wanted to speak on this one. Anyone else who wants to speak, pop up your hand.
I just don't want to vote for it, that's all.
Okay,
I don't need to speak on it.
Any other speakers? No. So Councillor Moughlin.
Yeah, sorry, just very quickly, just because we opened it up. Can I just get clarification of the total cost of that Gil Fraser lighting project itself? Noting that, yeah, I think it's the 100,000 that we had moved forward to be able to complete the project, but just from officers' advice on the total cost there.
Certainly. Yep. Director of Infrastructure and Projects and things.
Thank you. Through the chair, the budget allocated for the project in entirety was $278,000. The issue with the lighting is $80,000.
Cool. That helps.
Yep, thank you.
All good. All right, so I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And those against? So Councillor Vusic against and everyone else in favour. For a moment there, I thought Mr. Tattersall didn't vote, and that's good. You shouldn't vote. Excellent. Okay, Audit and Risk Committee. So I will just maybe run through these, and Councillor Groom as Chair, you might be able to guide me a little bit here in terms of which ones people might wish to speak to. So item 1, Emergency Management Committee. Yep, Councillor Moughlin, project update on the Civic Centre. Councillor Vusic, purchasing policy exemptions. Nope. Overdue debtors. Yep. Tenders awarded under delegation. Yep. Okay, so let's go through them one at a time. Try through it. It's all good. So item number 1, I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. And to Councillor Moughlin, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, for the benefit of elected members who weren't at audit and risk, in the first instance, I wanted to thank staff for taking on feedback from elected members, and particularly Councillor Groom, who had been looking to increase our participation in the Emergency Management Committee for some time. And the opportunity has arisen for us to be able to now do so. And what we see as best being able to come out of this is to help with those connections with our community and help with that resilience when emergencies do occur, and that we are able to respond to that in the best possible way. And personally, for me, having seen the events that have been occurring on the East Coast over the last 3 to 4 months, I just feel it's pertinent that we as elected members are across what is occurring from an emergency management perspective, and that we're able to provide that community input and come back to our elected member body and where and when we might need to look at implications in regards to strategic decisions and budget questions as well, and how we can prepare our city to respond for or respond to what we know are most probably going to be increasing emergencies that we'll face, and try and develop a more climate resilient city to be able to deal with those issues. So I put my hand up to participate in the management, the Emergency Management Committee, and yeah, I think Councillor Groom did as well, because we both shared an interest in that. But yeah, also open if other councillors want to talk about that this evening.
No, I don't think so. Great. So that's what's in the officer's recommendation. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, as at the zone the other day, we have actually resolved to have a 3.5-hour module presented to the zone. I think at the moment it's probably going to happen in August, but that's to do with emergency management for local government. So once we get clear up, in fact, I think there is a link, isn't there, Frank, on the site? So I'll try and find the link, and I'll send it through for those councillors who might be interested in attending that.
Just a point of clarification, the CEO has pointed out to me that I moved the amended officer's recommendation, which you've got in your additional documents. I'm sure you all knew that's exactly what I meant. Councillor Lawver.
Oh yeah, thank you, Mayor. Does this committee need deputy members as well then, as including members on the committee? It's just a question.
Good question. I'm not sure who can answer it. Do we need deputy members as well as members?
No.
No. CEO says that it's just the two members. Cool. All right. With all that, then I'm very happy to support this, and I can think of no two better people to represent us here and to feed back to us, I guess, what that work is that's underway, and how, as a council, we can benefit from that that work and that knowledge and that preparedness. So I'll put that on to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Excellent. Okay, that's going to bring us to the next item, which is on this piece of paper, which is the Walyalup Civic Centre project update. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Lawver would like to speak on that, and anyone else, please raise your hands.
My apologies, I left my hand up on the previous item.
I thought you were so quick. Councillor Busick, over to you.
Thank you. I am going to read out a narrative in relation to the Walyalup Civic Centre project and the costs associated with it. It's been a long time coming in terms that I need to read out my statement, as I have not supported the figures often that I presented in our monthly updates. and I would like you to withhold your comments until the very end. Thank you. What I am presented with in this table on page 71 of the agenda is only a selective narrative. To state that we are 371,679 positive balance against the building construction costs is at best misleading. It has taken me months to piece the Wallulap total project cost, and the total project costs are the figures that ratepayers ought to be presented with, and not just the selective building costs. In 2012, the King's Square business plan states that the total civic centre project costs are to be $45 million. We did not have $45 million in the bank to fund the project, so the business plan states that the $45 million total project costs would be funded by the sale of 3 city properties: Queensgate Car Park, Queensgate Centre and the Spicer site for $30 million. We had a shortfall of $15 million and the money was going to be borrowed from the state government. In my 2.5 years on council, the $45 million total project cost was never referenced against any of the financial reporting presented to me. However, we cannot ignore the business plan nor what we sold to the ratepayers. The total project cost was $45 million. From 2012 to 2018, understandably, there was a lot of work done to prepare the project. I would hypothesise that during this time, it was becoming clear that this civic building was going to cost significantly more than $45 million. We didn't go back and revisit the King Square business plan and make the correction, as we should have. In my view, we did find the extra money by selling off 3 more car parks: Adelaide, Josephson and Point Streets. We then went to the state government and asked for a $20 million loan instead of $15 million. We also lost ongoing revenue from selling those important producing assets, income producing assets. And we have not made up the loss of the revenue to date. It should be noted that it took generations of ratepayers to have built up these income performing assets. So following my logic, the figures are as follows. 2012, the funding in our business plan was $45 million. We know how we came to that $45 million. Between 2012 and 2018, there was a realisation that $45 million was well underestimated. So 3 car parks were sold off for approximately $7.85 million. There was an increase in state government borrowing from $15 million to $20 million. So the additional funds made available for this project was $12.8 million plus 45, which is $57.8 million. The June 2021 audited financials show another $11.3 million to be spent on projects, of which $9.3 million is to be spent on Wallulap Civic Centre. So you add 9.3 plus 57.85, you get the total project cost to date to be around about $67 odd million. To bring these figures to a conclusion, you would need to deduct $45 million from 67, and it indicates a significant $22 million shortfall or a blowout of the total project cost of the Civic Centre. Now, I may be wrong, and I may be only out by a few million, because I am putting together a financial jigsaw for my understanding. I don't know how much of the $7.8 million went into total project costs, or it might have gone into other buckets that we are dipping into. However, I am sure of this total because we have reported on these figures. I have for 2 years stated that the capital work in progress presented to me in monthly financial information has always been incorrect. Finally, with the 30th of June 2021 draft financial statements. This has been corrected and now shows 52.1 million expenditure incurred up to 30th of June 2021, with a further 11.8 million in capital commitments to be spent, plus additional ongoing costs to finish the project. About 9.3 million of this commitment is for the Civic Centre. So let's add up two figures, 52.1 million plus 9.3 million, and we get 61.4 million. So there are two figures here, 61 million or 67. Either figure is very different from the good news that we presented in the table on page 71 of the agenda. It is frustrating to see again in meeting attachment page 188, a reported capital work in progress being presented as 37,199,748. It is clearly incorrect as per the audited financial statements. Also, we should take into consideration that the King Square business plan stated we would generate approximately $1 million per annum for the lease of commercial space for the building to repay the $20 million government loan. This lease income from the commercial space is not actually happening, and yet our building is supposedly finished. Actually, the ratepayers are now repaying the $20 million loan without the commercial tenants. To my mind, the opportunity cost of this building is staggering. This is not the ratepayers' fault. There is no sound argument that our poor financials are a result of a small ratepayer base. I now understand that a horrendous rate increase of 20%, not that I would advocate it, but it wouldn't even touch the sides. The opportunity cost is that the $400 million city assets that should be continually upgraded have had little or no maintenance. We should be spending about 10 million a year just to maintain status quo. Lack of street lighting, horrendously hazardous footpaths across the entire city and suburbs, no major city public works in the near future, minimal cleaning, not being even able to replace our aging cleaning trucks, and the list could go on. The lack of transparency to the ratepayers and elected members is staggering. I now understand why we have no money for any significant maintenance, nor any significant money to spend on the activation of the city. One could come to the conclusion that the City of Fremantle's financials are in the ICU. We lost our financial buffer, and this is evident when something like a COVID emergency hits. The way we are managing our financials is maintenance cutbacks, staff cutbacks, and rate increases. I'm going to stop there because I have a real clear understanding why certain things are not happening in our city. So my 4 questions, which I will hand up, you don't have to answer them this evening, but my first question is, what is the current total project cost of the Walyup Civic Centre? When will the monthly financial information report show accurately the total project costs of the Civic Centre? How much has the total project costs of 45 million of that original business plan gone over budget? And the last question is, why has the total project costs blown out by 22 million? I would like to be wrong. I think I am somewhat right in what I have just said here with my figures. And I think it explains to me a lot every month when those figures don't add up and we are not going to be spending any significant money in this city until we address the elephant in the room and the overspending on a civic centre. These are my reasons why I bring this monthly item up month after month in my 2nd year, and it's taken me that long to piece it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busick, and the CEO said please do send that statement and your questions through to him. Councillors, if there's no further speakers on this item, I will put it to a vote. All those in favour? Yeah, and against? So Councillor Busick and Kamada against. Thank you, that's carried. Purchasing policy exemptions. Did someone wish to speak, or did you just want to call the vote on it separately? Right, so I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. I'll put it to a vote then. Someone's trying to speak, I hope.
I am trying to speak, sorry.
Yes, I was trying to read the facial expression. Is it the unmute facial expression? Go.
Yeah, that's right, sorry. So there is one item on the purchasing policy exemptions that was questioned at audit and risk, and I just wanted to quickly talk to that because we have had a very extensive response from officers. So people will see there's an item for $96,000 for Royal Fremantle Golf Course to maintain the public golf course, I just raised questions about that because it is an unusual value, a high value, procurement of a service, unusual time frame for what we normally see in the context of these exemptions. And what we now understand is that the city actually has entered into a lease for that land, and that's all been done with due process for the maintenance and the operation of the golf course. Royal Fremantle were the only respondee to that, and that's gone through due process. But part of that lease arrangement was that there was some income expected from management of the golf course, just people playing golf, for Royal Fremantle. But it delays in opening the golf course. There was a period of time that they had to maintain course without an income, and so this item relates to that. Officers also advised that they believe it won't be the amount that's been budgeted because the course is now operational. So that was put aside to cover that time. So just wanted, because it is an unusual item, I just wanted people to have that background and context to know what it is that we are signing off on.
Thank you, and that was a really useful clarification. Councillor Pemberton?
Thank you, and thanks for that clarification. I just had a follow-up question, I guess, then. Are Royal Fremantle paying us to lease and manage the land and get the income from the people who are paying golf?
That's one for Mr. Hammond. He's online somewhere.
Yes, through the Mayor, yes, Royal Fremantle are paying a base lease to occupy the course and operate the course.
Thanks.
Good stuff. Just because we've got this item up for discussion, I do wonder when we get the frequent artist exemptions whether we have something in our policy that isn't quite right that says, you know, it's a very obvious exemption that you go to an artist to produce something that they produce. Whether we maybe at some stage need to look at our policy to say we don't need to approve the artist exemptions. Anyway, just flagging it as something to think about because it's a bit of a, yeah, obviously, you know, there's only one band that plays that band's music. It's not something we're going out to tender for. Anyway, put that one to a vote. All those in favour? That looks to be unanimous. Thank you. The next one, overdue debtors report. I'll move it. Councillor Moughlin will second it. Councillor Lorber.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I just had a question, you know, kind of being new on page 82, the overdue debtors. There's key performance targets that were, well, on page 82 are obviously not meeting. So I was just wondering if the blowout of people more than 90 days overdue is because of COVID, or if that's something that is a regular thing, or maybe if we need to adjust what our performance targets are, because it seems like it's really quite high. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Hammond, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, certainly through the Mayor. The 90 days or more are predominantly made up of commercial properties, which are related to COVID-19, when there was legislation in place where we had to support or waive rent at that time.
So, oh yeah. So, is there a way to? I'm assuming we have a plan to bring that back in line with our key performance targets there, and get that back down.
Yeah, absolutely. So most of them are in payment plans, so we're slowly recovering that debt. It just takes a bit of time due to some of the amounts associated with it, but yeah, we have agreements in place with all of those debtors to recover that debt.
Councillor Lawver, does that satisfy your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Perhaps, Mr. Hammond, while we've got you on the line, I mean, I'm just wondering, is it, broadly speaking, would this be aligned in terms of recovery with your expectations in terms of kind of who's still struggling in a COVID environment, and who should be kind of digging their way out by now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main debtors we're working with at the moment are probably tourism-based operators who were most affected and are probably only just starting to come out now. So we'll probably see as tourists start to return. And I speak of, yeah, particularly accommodation providers who just haven't had any business over the past 2 years. So that's predominantly who we're dealing with. Also some hospitality operators who just haven't been able to, I guess, ride the wave and have had to, I guess, bow out.
Yep. Thank you. That's useful. Good to keep an eye on. All right, if there's nothing more on that one, I will put it to a vote. All those in favour? And I am seeing everyone in favour apart from Councillor, so all those against? Councillor Vusic against. Councillor Graham, I had you counted as in favour. Your hand was a little late, but if I'm wrong, yes, I'm right. Excellent. Good stuff. Okay, so that's going to bring us to the C reports, the C items.
Tenders awarded.
Oh, tenders awarded under delegation, right, you are. I'll move number 6, ARMCU 6, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Was there anyone who wished to speak on tenders awarded under delegation? No, I don't think anyone. Because there were no tenders under delegation. There's not a lot to say. Okay, all those in favour? That looks unanimous. Thank you. Why do we have a report when there's nothing in it? It's very confusing. Thank you. Okay, now we are genuinely at the C items. So we've got just scanning through to see if there's any of these that we could do on block. If I moved 3, 4 and 5 of the C items on block, would that concern anyone? You could vote against them on block. Councillor Vusic, you want them separately for a vote? Yep. All right. Okay, so we might go to the first C item, which is planning reform. I'll move that and seconded by Councillor Moughlin. People wish to speak on the first one. Councillor Lawver.
Yeah, just real quick. I just want to say I appreciate the city's position on this. And while personally I submitted a much stronger position on reforms to planning approvals and the JDAP process, I think the city's reached a really good spot to make this submission as they have. So thank you.
Yeah. Good comment. Anyone else on this one? All right, so I'll put this one to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Great. Okay, the next item is C item 2, proposed MRS amendment McCall Centre, and noting the amendment by Councillor Sullivan. So I'll move it and and Councillor Moughlin will second it. We'll jump into that one. Councillor Sullivan, I think it's probably wise to go to your amendment fairly promptly unless anyone else jumps in before that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Like the other one, but perhaps less wordy, although worthy in its own right, this is an amendment which just tries to, I guess, add a little bit more weight to the matters at hand. I foolishly perhaps have spent the last couple of weeks working on my own submission about this really, really important site. And every time I go back to it and the 32 years of intense planning that has occurred over this area, way back before Buckland Hill was developed, when community was trying to get things set aside, when the Blaming Parklands was the answer to that problem and went through an entire process and recommended the McCall Centre site would be set aside. This is a state government document saying it would be set aside and made as part of the Blaming Parklands that were being proposed as a response to a decade of community concerns. And then the subsequent Leighton Beach issue where the community re-supported the whole concept of that knuckle of land being merged into the coast and also being the gateway to the Blaming Parklands. And then subsequent to that, the commitments that were made to the community by the state government, by the West Australian Planning Commission, by ministers of the state, that the community's idea that that land should form part of the Foreshore Reserve still had validity even at that time, so 2006, and that it was premature for that land to be made available for that purpose, but that at the time when it was available, it would become a matter to be properly considered at that time. And guess what? We're at that time. The land came available 6 years ago, and all of a sudden, the state, presumably the land has gone back to the Department of Lands and they've gone, well, we don't know what to do with it. Let's sell it. Let's not worry about 32 years of past planning. Let's just worry about what one agency wants to do. We'll flog it to the highest bidder, and we won't worry about all of that strategic planning input that the community put in. But irrespective of all of that, and this is where part 3 comes in, so irrespective of all of that, what the state is doing is taking this relatively tiny piece of land and on the instruction, presumably, of the Department of Lands or whoever controls land anymore, they've put in a scheme amendment, an MRS amendment, which is like a spot rezoning of this isolated chunk of land that is in the middle of reserve land, and they're going to turn it into urban. And, you know, let's face it, urban, we need more urban, we need more development. We understand all of that. But you don't do it this way. You don't do it as a spot rezoning. And that is where this is wrong. And it's so wrong when it's right next to a railway station and there's all of this land around that isn't part of the conversation of this MRS amendment, that is wasted land that is splattered in the MRS map as red, meaning a red road. And that red road is a red flag to me. It's an area that needs to be sorted out. And even if this site, the McCall Centre, was zoned urban, it's still going to be surrounded by this ridiculous amount of red road that would be enough to park an aircraft carrier in. And so it needs to be sorted out because it's right next to a railway station. It's in what is defined in the government's framework as a station precinct. It's right next to, within a spitting distance of Stirling Highway, which in itself is a defined area in the government's framework for higher density development. And so for all of these new reasons, which is what part 3 is trying to capture, as well as all of the old reasons, this is a really terrible MRS amendment. And I'm gobsmacked that the West Australian Planning Commission could come out with spot rezoning like this. And it makes you wonder, who is actually implementing the state planning strategy? Who is actually going to deliver the extra parks and recreation and foreshore environments and community facilities that an extra 400,000 or 600,000 people in the central areas of Perth are actually going to utilise or need to utilise? Because if this keeps happening, we won't have any of that new infrastructure. So I'm adding part 3 because I see it as being critically important to say to the state, you need to implement your framework. You need to actually put money on the table for these sorts of things. It's not acceptable to flog off one of the best coastal assets at a time when you're actually asking all the developers to build high density residential. So we need to make this statement, and I hope you support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Councillor Lawver, you're up next. And you're not yet unmuted. Or did you put your hand down? I'm confused. I think you do not want to speak, so I'm going to go to Councillor Jones now.
Yes, I support the amendment. Just draw your attention to page 96 in the report, the paragraph in italics. The vision for Fleming Park lands is to establish the recreational needs of the community by focusing on links between the river and the sea, which conserves, enhances and promotes the natural and historical heritage of the area. Now, that was 1998, and I was on the Fleming Parklands Committee. It was chaired by Colin Barnett. And the idea was to create a kind of circular linear park, if there could be such a thing. So it'd have Port and Leighton beaches, the river foreshore around the football club, all the way around to Mosman Park, and then green links between Mosman Park and this area. So this is a critical part. And Fleming, the McCall Centre was flagged as a tea rooms and environment centre or something like that, or cultural centre and tea rooms in the Fleming Parklands report. It's a little bit mysterious where that Fleming Parklands plan went, to be honest. It appears and disappears. But I know that Mosman Park and Cottesloe have taken similar positions, that this is a key part of the linkages between the river and the sea. And I think they've either already passed resolutions or are in the process of passing resolutions to more or less say the same things that we are. So I agree that we need to fight this and not only preserve this bit, but we need to get all the other linkages in place. I mean, it's still not a great connection between the river and the sea, even if this is in place. We've still got railways, roads, and all sorts of other things in the way. So yes, I agree with the amendment and support it.
Thanks. Councillor Lang, you're up next.
Thank you. And I just wanted to really highlight a big thank you to Councillor Andrew Sullivan for flagging this and working with the team on this and putting together such a comprehensive submission towards the McCall Centre. And it's not in the city of Fremantle, but in my mind, this is where the future of Fremantle starts, in that exact location. The planning needs to be done right from that point to influence Leighton Beach all the way through to North Quay. So it's a great report, and in my opinion, this is the most critical crossroads and a starting point for the future of Fremantle right there. So well done to people who put that submission together. I think it's great.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. Councillor Busey.
Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Such eloquence and such passion and emotion. I certainly will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And likewise, I'll be supporting the motion. I think, sometimes we might think, oh, well, that's, not in our local government area, but it is absolutely critical to the planning. And I think it's highlighted through both of the MRS issues tonight that we need to get this area right. I think, in fact, there'd be a good justification for having I think a number of you have raised this before, a coastal strategy that actually links up all of the beaches and makes some sense of how we use our coastal areas. So this is another critical part of that. So I agree with the comments that this has been a really important piece of work, and it's really important that we remember the work that's been done by people to get us to where we are now, and even if the state government may have hopefully temporarily forgotten about some of those key decisions that were made. All right, I'll put this one to, unless Councillor Sullivan wants to close on the amendment.
Can I just, I neglected to say my appreciation for Paul Garbutt. I know that the staff were, obviously a little bit short of strategic planning, given some staff changes of late and the like. And yeah, he's done a tremendous job. I'm assuming others might have helped as well, but just wanted to pass on my appreciation for pulling that together in such a short period of time and doing such a great job of it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I'll put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. And on the item as amended, do we have any speakers? Otherwise, I'll go to a vote on that. All right, so I'm putting that to the vote. All those in favour? Sorry, I've got two screens on the go here. Excellent, so that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so the final of the C items, we've got the monthly financial report. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Do we wish, anyone wish to speak, or we'll just put it to Councillor Busick?
Just for the record, the capital works in progress is 52.1 million, not as stated as 37.2. Our own financial statements have corrected it. Thank you.
All right. So I'll take that as a statement rather than a question. Councillor Groom?
I would appreciate if staff are able to make any comment on that.
Do you need the question repeated, or do you? All right.
Through the chair, I'll go back and review that and provide elected members with an answer after the meeting. My understanding is, though, the work in progress comment of 51 million might refer to all works in progress currently, not just on the Wellyup Civic Centre, but it's something I'd need to go and check.
Okay.
That's certainly how I'd understood it in reading the report, that it's a total.
Councillor Archibald?
Yes, could I just mention again that when we have questions like this, and also the previous statement and questions that Councillor Vucic brought to the council, I think it is only fair to staff in particular, and also to us as councillors sitting around this table, that these questions are submitted well in advance of the meeting, so that the staff can bring comprehensive answers to us, because if there's substance to these questions, we want to know. I think all of us want to know. So please, in future, if these questions could be lodged so that staff can make responses for us. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put this one to a vote. All those in favour? And those against? Councillor Busick against. That's carried. The C item 4, statement of investments, I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Did we have any speakers on this? Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. And yeah, I just didn't want some work that staff had done to go to waste. So I appreciate, I had a question in regards to $7 million worth of investment, which was coming out of the books and going to operational costs this month. And the director of city business, the acting director of city business, had done some follow-up work. So to explain exactly where that had got to, appreciate the description that was given to describe our processes, but if he could also just give us an update as to where those funds had gone into the operational costs over the last month, that would be good.
Okay, Mr. Hammond.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. So as mentioned, some of that money was brought in to cover operational costs. That's primarily made up of wages and other sort of standard operational day-to-day costs. But another key one in this quarter, which you'll see this spike every quarter, is the quarterly payment for the ESL to the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, which is around $2.5 million.
I take it that's an annual thing that crops up, is it? Or
quarterly.
Oh, quarterly. Thank you. Okay. Wow.
Thanks for the answer.
Thanks. All right. I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. See item 5, schedule of payments. Move that, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Any discussion on that? Nope. All right. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And again, that looks unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Confidential. There's no motions of which previous notice has been given, no urgent business, no late items. So I will move that we go behind closed doors to allow us to deal with confidential business. And I will just pause now and so I'll need to put it to a vote. Seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.